Hello and welcome to Mystery Monday number 2, the case of the slow-moving ducks. Of course, with Mystery Mondays, we talk a lot about inferencing. We talked about this last week, and let's go take a look at our scale now. So our learning goal for today is to cite strong and thorough textual evidence to support an analysis of what the text says explicitly, as well as inferences drawn from the text, including where the text leaves matters uncertain. So at the end of today's reading, at the end of today's story, you'll be asked to rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 4. 4 being that you can draw inferences from the text, you can point to the evidence that the author uses to prove his or her point, and you're able to identify where the text leaves matters uncertain. You're also picking up on nuance, like sarcasm and irony. Notice if you're at a 3, that's almost exactly what the learning goal states, right? The 4 is a little bit different because I've added the nuance like sarcasm and irony. We want everybody at a 3. Hopefully by the end of the year, that's the goal, right? That means that you can successfully accomplish that learning goal. If you're at a 4, that's great. Above and beyond is always good. There's nothing wrong with that. A 2 means that you can draw inferences from the text and you're able to point to evidence that the author uses to prove his or her point. However, you're missing where the text leaves matters uncertain. Some of those pieces that we're just supposed to infer based on what is being said to us. And a 1 means you are unsure of how to draw inferences from the text. Any of these numbers, especially these bottom 2 and 1, are okay. Please let me know if you are at those numbers. This is not something that I share with the class, none of that. This is just really, it's a way for me to learn kind of where you're at and how I can better explain the story or highlight pieces of the story that are important. I'll be a better teacher to help you learn is essentially what this does. And so that's our learning skill. You will see that at the end of the story. In addition, you will see these questions being asked. The answers to these questions are obviously in the story. Doyle's tone is such that he does not like Dilly. Why do you think he is unhappy to have Dilly join their team? And 2, considering when and where this event took place, why can Dilly not trust the testament of the witnesses? And then at the very end, as you know and as has been common, there will be a final question. What weakness has Dilly been able to detect in the witness's story? So it seems to me that Doyle and Dilly don't get along, mostly because Doyle doesn't like him. Let's look at what that might mean in the story when we read. Considering when and where the story took place, so it seems that setting will be important to answering the question, right? When and where. Why can Dilly not trust the testament of the witnesses? So there's going to be something there that helps Dilly make sense of the question at hand, and there's a certain weakness that he's been able to detect. What is that weakness? Sorry, to detect the witnesses. Sorry, what is that weakness? And finally, as is common with our Mystery Mondays, we have vocab words: barrister, trivial, piddly, declamatory, spiel. And I think that's it. I think there are just 5 this week. So there's your 5 words. Those obviously will pop up in the Edpuzzle video as we come across them in the story. So let's get started. So we have the case of the slow-moving ducks. It was not just the smell of the lawyers' offices that bothered him. Jeff Dilly decided as he looked around the library. To be honest, there really was no smell anyway. These offices just seemed musty because of all of those stacks and stacks of law books. What bothered him, Jeff realized, was the overwhelming importance of everything. Starting with the books. That many books simply looked important. Then there were the secretaries. They always seemed so crisply efficient and important. The furniture was important too, thick and solid and ordered, like the books. Then there were the lawyers themselves. They behave like high priests, Jeff muttered aloud. Jeff Dilly, a private investigator, had worked himself up to the point of walking out of the library and chucking the whole thing when the door swung wide at the urgent bidding of F. V. Douglas Doyle, barrister, solicitor, notary public, and senior partner of Doyle, Feldstein, and Speranzini. Jeff was beginning to conclude that it was his imagination which had made the door open more majestically than an ordinary door when Doyle spoke. "You're Dilly then, right? No hello, no greetings, no preliminaries, just a confirmation of identity." Jeff felt a bit like a hostile witness. Well, two could play at that game, and he had been going to leave anyway. "It was you that called me. My name is in your appointment book." Jeff felt he'd scored a small point. Sorry, I had a little computer malfunction there. Doyle peered over his glasses. "Yes, but it was not my idea. Not at your fee, anyway." "My fee?" Jeff almost came out of his seat. He knew he was the most expensive private investigator in town. More than one potential client had a change of heart after the first discussion of daily rate and expenses. On the other hand, the reputation of Doyle, Feldstein, and Speranzini, although one of excellence, was also one of high fees, and extreme parsimony to boot. "My fee?" Jeff repeated. "Look, if there's going—" "Gentlemen, please." The soft voice commanded attention. "It was my request to involve you, Mr. Dilly. My name is Ben Paul." From behind F. V. Douglas Doyle, a tall, graying man held out his hand to Jeff. "I'm told you are the best in the field. I asked Mr. Doyle to bring you in." Doyle took a seat and began talking as though nothing at all had happened. Jeff realized why the man was so good in court. "Mr. Paul here is being sued. The case is wrong. It's crooked. It's trivial. It should be thrown out." He paused uncomfortably. "We just can't find the weak spot in the other side." He looked at Ben Paul. "As yet." "I was rear-ended last spring on a country road," Ben Paul explained in his soft voice. "A young man on a motorcycle hit me when I slowed to let a duck lead her little ones across the road. The young man was going very fast. When he hit me, he catapulted right over the top of my car. He was hurt very badly." "Well, wait a minute. Jeff was shaking his head. "First of all, I don't do traffic. Too messy, too biddly, and everybody lies. Secondly, if he hit you, shouldn't you be suing him?" "I've advised my client to countersue," Doyle intervened. "At the very least, we can delay the thing a year or more." Ben Paul continued in his soft voice. "Mr. Dilly, it's not quite that way. You see, I'm being sued for $500,000 over and above my insurance coverage. The young man has two witnesses who will swear that I stopped abruptly and with no reason. That makes me the cause of the accident." "Well, did you stop that way or not?" Dilly wanted to know. "Mr. Paul slowed," Doyle stated in his court voice. "He slowed because of his laudable commitment to wildlife preservation. He did not stop abruptly." "The young man is lying," Ben Paul said in his quiet, authoritative voice. Jeff Dilly saw what a powerful team these two would make in court. Doyle, with his declamatory, stentorian style, contrasted with Ben Paul's mellow but earnest sincerity. "His witnesses are lying too," Ben Paul continued. "They are all family, cousins by marriage, I think. Here's the police report." Doyle handed it to Jeff, who began to skim the summary. "Lake Erie Division, June 10th, 9:05 p.m., Concession 9 at Side Road." "You can read it later," Doyle said. "Everything's there. The problem is simply the witnesses. If we can shake them—" He frowned and thought. "Remember that hot, muggy spell early last summer? You see, they were sitting out front. It happened almost in front of them. I've been there. They have a clear view of the road from their little front yard, but only right in front of the place." Ben Paul continued. "In fact, 3 seconds earlier, or later, and they would have not been able to claim seeing anything because there's swamp on either side of their farmhouse right up to the road, and big willow trees too." Jeff pursed his lips. "How come you're so sure they're lying?" Doyle pulled his glasses farther down his nose and held Jeff Dilly with the look that had withered many a witness. "Because my client is telling the truth." Then he softened. "Besides, their spiel is too pat, too rehearsed. They're lousy actors. Even an amateur can tell they're using a script. And you need some way to crack the shell in court," Jeff added. Right, Doyle responded. Just one thing. With amateur liars, you only need a nudge, and they'll roll right away. He paused. Why? Do you mean you've got something? Jeff Dilly smiled. Yes. Do you want it? At my fee? What weakness has Jeff Dilly been able to detect in the witness's story? All right, so let's take a look at a few things that we know to be true about this case. We have Ben Paul. He is being sued for essentially stopping too abruptly and causing an accident. We have Doyle, who is Paul's lawyer. And then we have Dilly, who has been hired as a private investigator. We also know that Doyle's law firm is well respected. But we also know that Dilly's skill set is well respected. And as a result, the two of them don't really get along because, well, they both think that they're very, very good, right? So before we get over to the questions, there's two sections that I'd like to go back to and read and kind of talk you through as the two parts that are, as a close reading of these kind of gives us the answers that we need. So we've got them sort of arguing about their fees being too expensive. Ben Paul comes in and says, "Gentlemen, please, both of us sit down. You're both very good. And as a result of this, I've asked Mr. Doyle to bring you in." So it says, Doyle took a seat and began talking as though nothing at all had happened. Jeff realized why the man was so good in court. "Mr. Paul here is being sued. The case is wrong. It's crooked. It's trivial. It should be thrown out." He paused uncomfortably. "We just can't find the weak spot in the other side." He looked at Ben Paul. "As yet." And that "as yet" would suggest, I'm good enough to do this. I'm going to find it. I just haven't found it yet. But that's why they brought in the private investigator. And the second most important piece here is the police report. It says, "Here's the police report." Doyle handed it to Jeff, who began to skim the summary. Lake Erie Division, June 10th, 9:05 p.m. Remember the question, we'll go back to it in just a second here, but when and where is important. June 10th, 9:05 p.m. "You can read it later," Doyle said. "Everything's there. The problem is simply the witness. If we can shake them." He frowned and thought. "Remember that hot, muggy spell early last summer? You see, they were sitting out front. It happened almost in front of them. I've been there. They have a clear view of the road and their little front yard, but only from right in front of the place." So given those close readings and some of the discussion that we've had, let's take a look at the first question. Doyle's tone is such that he does not like Dilly. We talked about this with the fees and things, how they kind of argue about their fees, but they're kind of each the best in their field. Why do you think, though, that he is unhappy to have Dilly join their team? I kind of gave away this answer about a minute and a half ago. And secondly, considering when and where this event took place, the police report that we just talked about, why can Dilly not trust the testament of the witnesses? And the final question, given the close reading and the questions that lead up to it, What weaknesses has Dilly been able to detect in the witness's story? All right, here is your solution. In the country around Lake Erie, in fact, in most of North America, no one would be able to sit out in their front yard in June at dusk during warm weather, even if they lived if they lived anywhere near a swamp. They would simply be eaten alive by mosquitoes. The witnesses with swamp on both sides of their front yard were certainly not likely to have been where they say they were because the mosquitoes were so bad. So this is the ultimate inferencing question, right? All we know is that it was 9:05 p.m. It was June, and they lived near a swamp. Remember, inferencing is making an inference is essentially taking that logical leap to the conclusion based on the things that we know. And I just listed the things that we know, right? 9:05 June, swamp, dusk. So the logical leap is simply that, and we're Minnesotans, we know that mosquitoes are bad. There were lots of mosquitoes. You don't stay outside as long, very long if you're getting eaten alive by mosquitoes. And so that is the inference that we're able to make. And that is the weakness that Dilly has been able to detect in the story. My question to you is this. What was presented to you just now, or maybe in that close reading or in the solution, that you didn't have in your answer to this question? What would you add? And finally, here is your scale. I'm going to zoom out so we can get all the words on there. Would you rate yourself a 4, a 3, a 2, or a 1? Thank you. And upon completing this video, of course, satisfactorily, you've earned 1 unit for today.